the other day. I was like looking over my Spotify recently played, and I was like, man, no one would ever be able to predict my Spotify, and it's so diverse. Look, I've got 90s hip hop, 90s worship music, 90s movie soundtracks, 90s jazz. And I was like, wait a minute. There's something they all have in common.
Welcome to the Office Hours Podcast. This is TK Coleman and Isaac Morehouse. We're like the Geek Squad for your professional development. Got a job you're trying to get, a work-related issue you're trying to resolve, a project you're trying to complete, an obstacle that's holding you up? Well, you're in the right place. You bring the problem, we bring the nuts and bolts. This is where you get philosophical insight and actionable advice on how to take charge of your life and career.
Oh man, hey, so I saw this movie this past weekend, and there was a line in there that I've got to talk with you about. So the lady is talking about a decision she made when she was younger and how she regrets it. It was a bad decision, and she said, I should have known that something was wrong with my choice when I couldn't tell my mother about it. And she says, and that's a good piece of advice for you. Never make choices that you can't tell your parents about. And I thought about that. And then the next day, you posted on your, you actually reshared an old blog post you wrote about how to not let your parents control you. And we've had a lot of conversations about the whole topic of parenting, following your dreams, what to do when those two things are in conflict. And I just kind of like to dive into that topic as a whole. My first question is, do you agree with that advice that you shouldn't make choices that you can't tell your parents about?
I mean, I don't know that I unequivocally agree in like a legalistic sense. Like, oh, there is no scenario in which, there's plenty of different parental relationships in which there would be things that you might feel completely comfortable doing that you wouldn't tell your parents about. But I think I like the general thrust of it. And I actually think it's in accordance with some of the stuff I write about in that post about how to not let your parents control you. It's not run away and hide. It's more draw a clear line in the sand. And so when you think about, be willing to tell, when I hear don't do something you're not willing to tell your parents, I don't hear a restriction on action. I hear an exhortation for communication.
Oh man.
You
I
see?
love that. Yeah.
So like if you have an action that you're comfortable doing, tell your parents, like use that as am I willing to tell them something that they won't like to hear? And be willing to disappoint your parents. Be willing to frustrate your parents. Be willing to tell them something they don't like. If it's something you believe in, an action you're comfortable with, right? Now that can be a good check to find out, well, maybe I really don't feel comfortable with it, but I wouldn't see it so much as that direction because you may be, letting yourself be manipulated by your parents' expectations or whatever, but I think more you decide on the actions that you believe in, and then rather than running and hiding from it, like, hey, Mom, Dad, this is what I'm doing. And like, I'm going to do it. I feel right about it. If you don't, I hope you're okay with it. I don't want to have to give up the relationship. But if you don't, and you don't so strongly that you're not going to talk to me again, I'm willing to make that sacrifice because I think this is right. But the minute you're comfortable talking to me again, I'm still here. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I've always disagreed with this idea that in order to be true to yourself, you have to cut your parents off and refuse to ever talk to them, that you've got to run away. And I don't think there's any coincidence that that's something that cults teach you to do explicitly, right? The first thing they do is they try to drive a wedge between you and your family and friends so that now you're being indoctrinated in a certain direction and you never have to communicate with your family and friends. You never have to deal with the contrast of their opinions and their perspectives. And I think there's something kind of weak, kind of self-defeating, and kind of antithetical to maturity when the only way you can hold a belief is by running away from the people that might challenge you. I think the key to being a mature, autonomous, independent adult, the key to being a strong person is learning how to figure out how you're going to relate to a world, including your parents, who may not always see eye to eye,
Yeah, I almost see it like the key to freedom in relationships, particularly with your parents, which, by the way, this is a very big problem. This is a massive problem. Like the number of people who are living half alive and who are sacrificing their dreams on the altar of the good opinion of others based on their parents needing to please their parents or feeling manipulated or guilted by their parents. It's massive. It's
not like a problem that millennials are having.
No, it's massive, and it's cross-generational, and it's primarily good parents who are well-meaning that are the culprits, right? And it's not that they're trying to deliberately manipulate or control, but they don't realize, and I know I suffer from this as a parent, I can tell already with my own kids, but they don't realize, because kids will tell you to your face, like, I'm not going to do what you say, you think your kids are all independent, whatever, but the psychological, emotional needs of kids to be approved of by their parents is so much stronger than parents assume. And so there's just so many ways in which parents, a little look of, finger wagging, or I'm not proud of you, I'm ashamed of you, like how powerful that can be and how hard it is for kids to break free. I mean, I see people living miserable lives because they're afraid of getting that disapproval from parents. So it is a huge issue, but I would say rather than, to be free from, being controlled by my parents or free from a toxic relationship even, the solution is not to break all ties with them. The solution is to do something, to be willing to allow them to break all ties with you, so to speak, right? So it's not to excommunicate them, but it's to do what you know you need, even if it means they excommunicate you. So I always like that approach where it's like, I am going to draw the line, I am going to be me, and I am willing to suffer you deciding not to talk to me. But I'm not going to make it as a principle, I'm cutting you off.
Yeah.
Because that seems stupid and stubborn too. Yeah. And the goal isn't just, hey, cut off your parents, because like nobody has that as a goal in life, to not talk to their parents. They have a goal that their parents don't approve of. And if the only way you can achieve it is if you like proactively cut them off, I think that's inferior to concretely, resolutely saying, I'm going after this goal. And if it means if you cut me off, I'm still going after this goal. Much better.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, how my father is a pastor, but he grew up in Alabama on the farm, and his dad wasn't like a super church-oriented guy. Good guy, hardworking guy, provided for his family. But when my father said he wanted to be a pastor, his dad was kind of like, that's a very weird career. And he didn't have a problem with my dad wanting to live a religious life, but it just seemed like something that was very unstable. It wouldn't allow you to provide for your family. And he reacted to it with the kind of nervousness and concern that a parent today would have if their child said, hey, I don't want to go to college. Instead, I want to move to New York and be a dancer. Like a parent might freak out at something like that. And my father said one thing he made it a point to never do was to treat disagreement as if it had to be expressed with disrespect. He expressed to his father, hey, this is what I feel called to do. This is what I believe in. And it was something that as my father moved in the direction of, as he provided for himself, as he proved with results that this is something that could work and that he was going to stick with it, his father became more and more supportive over time. I think sometimes parents are actually more right about their disagreement and disapproval than people give credit for. Sometimes parents are reacting to the lack of evidence of success. And parents are coming at it from the vantage point of, I've provided for you. I've been the one who's been taking care of you. I have no evidence that you are going to exercise persistence and resilience. And I think it's a great opportunity when your parents disagree with your dreams to realize that being an adult and being an independent person is all about realizing that respect is earned, that you don't get respect as a freebie because you were born from someone. You get respect because you have shown your ability to do something, to do it with composure, and to actually achieve results. And when you lose composure and you feel the need to get angry and argue with people and disrespect, it only proves that you may not be ready for what the world's going to throw at you when you go after your dreams.
It's almost a test, and I don't think it's explicit or conscious, but from the parents, like, I'm going to put up a little resistance. And again, I'm not saying that like this means you should always do this as a parent, but I'm going to put up a little resistance. And if you are an autonomous adult who's matured to that level, that resistance won't be enough to stop you. And once I see that it's not enough to stop you, my respect for you will go up and our relationship will level up. I'll never forget, I had a boss in an early job, and I came into the job and it was to start this new program. And they had this, here's the plan for this program, and here's what, here's sort of the roadmap. And I came back and I said in my first week on the job, I said, I don't like that roadmap. I'm going to do a totally different one. Here's my roadmap.
Yeah.
And my boss, he looked at me and he said, okay. So some time went by and I was pursuing my roadmap. And I had different bumps and hurdles and I had some failures and setbacks. But by the end of like the first 6 months or whatever, like it was getting some traction. It was working. And I had a meeting with him and he said, I got to be honest. I liked you. That's why we hired you. But I thought your plan was terrible. And frankly, I thought it was like you had way too much moxie as such a young guy to come in and say that you had a different plan and you were just going to pursue that. And he said, but you strike me as the kind of guy that even if you do it, if I said, nope, you got to stick to this plan, you wouldn't learn anything and you wouldn't be as good. And he said, I wanted you, even if it cost us some time, I wanted you to learn the hard way so that you'd be all the better when you pursued our plan. He goes, well, it turns out that our plan actually wasn't that good. Yours had some mistakes, but it was a little better. So I'm glad it turned out that way. And he said, but like he told me that he wasn't saying it to brag on himself, but I was so impressed like that he sat there and was like, okay, this punk kid has this totally ridiculous plan. That's not, but he let me do it.
Yeah.
Even at the cost of like 6 months of what he assumed would be failure. Luckily it wasn't entirely, but, and I think that's a really big moment that I try to learn from as a parent, because it's your best intentions that are the most dangerous to your kids. Like you don't want your kids to fail. And if my boss had been afraid of me failing, he wouldn't have let me pursue what he thought was a failing plan. But he wasn't. He was completely okay with that. He was like, yeah, we have a long-term commitment to this employee. So if he screws up for 6 months pursuing the wrong plan, I think it's going to be an investment in the long run in knowledge and understanding and humility and whatever else. And so the willingness to say, you see your kid doing something that you think is stupid, that they're doggedly committed to.
Yeah.
Like being willing to let them fail. I think there's something to that that's really important. Trying to pull every tool out of your toolkit, appeal to guilt and shame and all these other things just to prevent them from making a bad decision, I think is very dangerous. It's very dangerous because it's not that even if it saves them from a bad decision, it also saves them from something else, growing up into an autonomous adult. And you don't want to save them from that.
Yeah, yeah. All right, so what if it's something where it's not just like, okay, this is what they want to do, and I have a mild preference for something else. It's you generally think your child is doing something stupid, perhaps dangerous, and you can't fake it. You can't talk yourself out of it. So it's not like, oh, I want my son to play baseball, and I think he's naturally suited for that, but he insists on basketball. Well, my son isn't going to ruin his life by me letting him have his way. But sometimes people make decisions about careers, about who they marry, like all kinds of things, who they hang out with, that makes a parent feel genuine fear. Like, I think if you go this way and I don't like manipulate you, or I don't put my foot down, or I don't fight with you, your life is going to be ruined.
I mean, it's kind of similar to like we talked about, it's a weird analogy, but I think it's similar. If you want to pay a raise from somebody, right? Mm-hmm. You don't bluff first. So as a parent, okay, let me imagine if they make this decision that I think is very self-destructive, would I rather cut off contact with them, for example, and have no contact with them after having made this self-destructive decision? Or would I still want to have contact with them, right? So you don't want to bluff and be like, I'm going to try to get them to make a different decision by threatening something that I'm not actually going to do, right? Similar to how the child would approach it. Say your piece, your position, and then leave it to them to make the decision. Say, look, you're an autonomous being. You're going to do what you're going to do. But I want to tell you, this is why I feel so strongly that this is a bad decision. Now, if you do it, I'm still going to love you, and I'm still going to be here for you. But I don't want you to go through something unnecessarily, or if you're like, if you do it, I won't let you live in the house anymore. Not because I don't love you, but like whatever it is that you think is the actual outcome, just say it in no uncertain terms, make it clear, and then let them make the decision, having all the costs laid out on the table in an honest way. I don't know, what would you do? I mean, what's your take on that?
I like what you're saying about don't bluff. Like, if the reality is, hey, all right, you can make that decision, but I'm not going to finance that. You got to support yourself, and you're willing to back that. That's cool. If it's something like I'm going to cut you off, and you really don't feel that way, I do believe that's a bluff. But even then, I don't think people are always bluffing when they threaten to cut off. And I realized something when you were just talking, and that is when people follow through on their threats to cut you off, they're actually ignoring the incremental nature of progress. And this works both ways. This works when a parent cuts off a child, when a child cuts off the parent. You're overlooking the fact that even though someone might disagree with you right now, and they might be completely stubborn in their position right now, that over time, that person may lighten up, perhaps not at a pace that is your ideal, but they may be willing to make more compromises along the way in order to cooperate with you, in order to support you, and so forth. And the probability of that happening is higher if you don't threaten people to cut them off, and if you don't cut them off. And so I think if you're a parent and you feel that way, I mean, really, to me, it comes down to this. Either you have the power or you don't. You know, if you're dealing with an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, you have to be honest with yourself and just acknowledge that you don't have the power to make them do something that you want them to do. And it's always in your best interest to be honest with yourself and them about that, because everything else you do will be taken a lot more receptively than if you treat that person like, hey, I don't just disagree with you, but I'm going to force you to do what I want you to do. Like, you got to be real about your power. You don't have that power. They can do whatever they want. And I think it's important to tell them that. Like, I can't make you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You don't want to like appeal to a last resort that if they pushed, you wouldn't be able to back it up, but you're just hoping they don't notice that yet, right? It's like the kid that like doesn't yet know that they're stronger than their parent. And if you're appealing to them with like, you know, I will physically restrain you, and you actually can't, you're just hoping they don't know that you can't, right?
Yeah.
Like, not a good situation to be in.
But what about the reverse, though? Because I think sometimes, you know, think back when you were 18, 19, you may not have had the confidence that you acquired by the time you turned 30 for being able to disagree with someone and focus on what you wanted to do without there being a lot of tension. Some people would say, I cannot stay in touch with the person who's always challenging my beliefs and still focus on beliefs at the same time. So if an 18-year-old is hearing us say, hey, you don't need to cut off your parents to follow your dreams, and they're thinking, yeah, but if I stay around them and if I keep talking to them, they're just going to make me doubt myself and still away my motivation, and then I can't move forward. What would you say to that?
I mean, I don't know. I still feel like you don't need to cut them off. You need to be willing to let them cut you off. I still think it's the same scenario. The result may be a cutoff, right? But I don't know that it's that much harder. I mean, maybe it is for someone to be like, I hate you, I'm never talking to you, and run away, than to say, hey, this is what I'm doing, and if you choose to cut me off because of it, I'm still going to do it. But it doesn't seem that much harder to me, you know? Really, it's just a subtle flip. I think it's important what you said too, like remembering if you make these big ultimatums, if you make it about the decision to cut somebody off or not or whatever, you miss the opportunity for change and growth, and that's especially important. Parents are much less likely to change over time because as the older we get, the less likely we are. But kids, I've seen this with my own kids, they'll stick their foot in the sand and say, I am not going to compromise on this. This is like who I am, and there's no changing it. And literally like 2 days will go by and they'll be complete. You know what I mean? Things change quickly when you're young, especially, and the more information you get from the world. So I think as a parent, it's incumbent on you to be the one who's more generous and a little more in terms of it doesn't mean weaker, and it certainly doesn't mean enabling or hiding cause and effect from people, but the fewer ultimatums you can have, the fewer threats of, you know, retribution or whatever you can have, the fewer tools of manipulation and guilt that you pull out. I'll be ashamed of you if you do this, you know, the better.
You know, I think something that's easy to forget in all relationships is that your advice is less important than the amount of trust and respect you have from the person you're trying to advise. John Maxwell puts it this way. He says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
That's one that you could have made up. It's that pithy, yeah.
But, you know, you think about it, when when your children are really young, one of the first things they signal to you is that they're going to take advice from people that they think are cool and people who seem to like them more than they're going to listen to the people who have quality advice. It's not about quality advice. It's like, does this person like me? Does this person get me? Do I feel a connection with this person? And so if you're in a position where you want to influence someone, you can't just be obsessed with how right you think you are, even if you actually are right. You've got to understand that a relationship based on genuine connection and trust is your greatest asset. It's the greatest tool you have if you want to be able to have an impact on this person's life. And it's kind of paradoxical because it's sort of like what studies have shown about criticism. When someone does something wrong and you want to elevate their performance, the instinct is to just call out everything they do wrong, to pick at them all the time. But it's the opposite that motivates people. It's find the one thing that they did well out of the 100 that they screwed up on, and you praise them disproportionately for that one thing, and that elevates performance.
So go on iTunes and figure out one thing we've done well in this podcast. Yeah. And give us a 5 and praise us for it. No, I think it's important, though, the thing you said, the Maxwell quote that, first show that you care. Mm-hmm. It's easy as a parent to interpret that as, so just always make sure you're loving and make sure no matter what, they know you love them, whatever. Mm-hmm. And to let that go into a place that's not very healthy. So I think that the younger kids are, the more the sort of just make sure you're caring and loving is important. But showing that you care can take a lot of different forms. Showing that you love someone. So as kids get older, sometimes showing that you care means doing things that demonstrate your love for them exceeds your desire for them to like you. So there are times when a kid is, whatever, going to touch a hot stove or do something, maybe they're facing a bunch of peer pressure and they don't have the strength within them to resist it. And when you as a parent draw a line or say, hey, I'm going to put a boundary here, and they're going to react and be mad at you. And that's almost a test that they're giving you. Do you love me enough to do this even if I say that I'm mad at you for it? And so I think that's important to understand because it's easy to get too much like, okay, so it just means never doing anything that makes my kid unhappy so they know that I love them. It's like, no.
Mushy love.
Yeah, exactly. They won't respect you for that. They won't feel loved. They will feel like you just want them to think you're cool more than you actually want them to, to love you.
Yeah, there's a dating analogy here too. I mean,
there's always a dating analogy.
There's always a dating analogy, right? If you want to be more attractive to someone,
brush your teeth.
The first step is to master the art of being non-desperate, right? Even if you feel a strong attraction to that person, it is never going to help you if your style of communicating with them signals that you need, that you're not going to be able to sleep at night if they don't talk to you. The less needy you become, the more people, want to be around you.
I was thinking that great scene from the amazing movie, What About Bob? Gimme, I need.